In 2005, my favourite racing game of all time was released. Need for Speed Most Wanted achieved critical and financial success and cemented itself as one of the best arcade races ever created. Black Box were happy for like 5 minutes before they began development on their next game, Need for Speed Carbon. Carbon was going to be bigger and better in every way, and available on even more platforms. 14 in total, including arcade, PS2, PS3, Zeebo, whatever that is. These were the days of games appearing on every single platform that one could own. If it had a screen, there was a good chance a game was crammed onto it. Not only did we have arcade and Zeebo versions of Need for Speed Carbon, we also had mobile and handheld versions, which is what we're going to focus on today. The handheld versions of Need for Speed Carbon were special compared to other handheld ports of the time. Not content with just copy and pasting a vague approximation of the console release, like many of their industry peers, Team Fusion, Exient Entertainment, and the other offshoot studios set out to create one of the most ambitious arcade races ever put on handheld consoles, with unique mechanics and a whole new bonkers story. They created Need for Speed Carbon, Own the City. Own the City's lead designer Matt Tromporski published a dev diary with IGN in 2006 to help promote their upcoming game. Later in this video, I'll be focusing on the story and gameplay of the DS version, and these excerpts mostly concern the development of the PSP version, but don't worry about it. Matt's team at Team Fusion created the PSP version, working in tandem with the other teams such as Exient Entertainment on the DS version. Matt specifically working as a producer on the other ports. So look, I'll be mentioning a couple things that aren't relevant to the DS version, but who cares? Matt worked on the handheld version of Need for Speed Underground 2 and the spin-off Need for Speed Underground Rivals, as well as the full release of Underground and Hot Pursuit 2, so he knew his stuff. Fun fact, he also worked on Dead Space 2 and is currently working on Fashion League by Fin Play, so that's neat. Team Fusion wanted to make a Need for Speed game that was a clear step up from the other portable options in the franchise, and they smashed it. Creating an open world for the PSV version, the first and only Need for Speed handheld version with one, and a vibrant, bright, nighttime world for the DS. The DS sadly unable to handle the full open world, but the effort they put into the track design and set dressing placed it leagues above Most Wanted DS. Seriously, go take a look at some Need for Speed Most Wanted DS footage when you can. It's foul. Better yet, let me show you some. Like I said earlier, Need for Speed Carbon set out to be bigger and better than the games before it, with the biggest change being the introduction of crew members and a slightly darker story. The console version featured blockers, drafters, and scout as crew member types. Own the City differed here, creating their own unique crew members different from the console release. Brawler, who would ram opponents and crash them off. Assassin, who would target then spike strip an opponent, and Drafter, who is exactly the same as the Drafter in the main game. They weren't that creative. Matt Tromporski spoke on this. We were coming up with cool names for our crew classes, and someone shouted out, "Assassin!" and I wrote that down. I don't think we had any idea what the Assassin would do at that point, but it sounded really cool. The gameplay was able to be extrapolated somewhat consistently from the main game, with Team Fusion putting their own spin on a few concepts. The duels were kept, taking place on regular city streets instead of the canyon. Handling was also tuned in a way to have it be actually playable on a smaller screen and using the D-pad instead of analog sticks. But the main thing people think of when they think of Own the City isn't its slightly different controls and tweaked game design, it's its story. In Matt Tromporski's own words, "I wanted to do something more edgy than just your usual boy aspires to be a great racer story. I think that's really neat when you can take a genre like whodunit murder mysteries and mix them with a totally different genre like car racing. I'm pretty sure no one's done that in a video game before. You're right, Matt, no one had done that, because it's insane. For those of you unsure with the story of the main Need for Speed Carbon game, let me give you the brief Cliff Notes version of it. The player leaves Rockport at the end of Most Wanted, BMW in hand. They're chased into Polmont City, the BMW being wrecked in a chase with certified douche Sergeant Cross. Darius and Nikki save the player, despite Nikki thinking the player stole prize money years ago. The player clears their name, controls the city, and defeats Darius after it turns out he was the thief all along, after a good double cross or two, especially from Sergeant Cross. Own the City deviates very heavily from this. Own the City more closely resembles a Fast and Furious-like action thriller mixed with an Agatha Christie novel, complete with amnesia and double crosses. So how does this wild ride start? The game opens to an intense race with the player character's brother and two others. Bright headlights fill the screen, a crash occurs, the brother is killed, and the player gets amnesia. And that's how we jump into this rated G for general audiences game, with murder and amnesia. The player wakes up and then teams up with their brother's girlfriend and his former wingman. I'm the lucky one? Gee, thanks, Sarah. Sure do miss my brother, though. They set out to figure out who killed their brother and exact revenge. Okay, quick pause. This, as a reminder, is the intro to the story for a children's arcade racer, and it's already a better story than the last 6 mainline Need for Speed games. Further, it's nuts. Tiny 11-year-old me playing this game had no idea what was happening, but I sure did enjoy the cool cartoons. That is one thing I haven't mentioned. To get around the limitations of their target consoles, and as a general stylistic choice, the cutscenes are in a comic book style with voiceover, or in the case of the DS version, with text boxes, where it makes it very unclear who is actually talking sometimes. The devs didn't have the budget for CGI cutscenes, didn't want to over-rely on text boxes, or compressed FMV, so they thought outside the box and it really made it more engaging. The art was also done by a former Marvel Comics artist, and it's clear the care they took to really give this game its own identity, and I love it, personally. Some of it can get a little compressed on the DS screen, but the art certainly is really the reason that I keep coming back to this game. And oh, what's this? Sarah has decided, now that the tutorial's over, I can't use her car anymore. Suppose I'll buy my own. Let's see my fantastic choices. Oh no. Well, I choose the Golf, of course. That visual impact rating is really more important than you think. Of course, I would choose the Golf if the player, for some reason, isn't just given both cars. Most of the extra story not told in cutscenes is conveyed via texts, a trademark of the Need for Speed series, a cheap way to get around making more cutscenes, and, well, it's a DS game, what do you expect? We kick off our career seeking to take the territory of all the other crews in the city. We've got the Lucky Sevens, our and our brother's former crew, now led by Douche Arjun. The East Siders, led by Poor Boy. That's right, the Need for Speed Underground crew, led by Eddie, makes their second appearance in the series here in Carbon Own the City. The Sirens, led by Layla, Woman. Corpse, led by MK, who we can all tell who he voted for in 2016, and finally Crimson Crew, led by Clutch and X, who win the award for most needlessly edgy name, logo, and accessories. The general structure of the game is somewhat similar to a scaled-down version of the main game. Each district has set events, beat enough to challenge the underboss, beat them to challenge the boss, win, get some story, move on. Also similar to Carbon is locking rewards behind specific events. Some just give points, whereas others unlock being able to buy certain cars or customization options. That's right, we don't earn cash or money for winning events, we get points, which are different. Somehow. I think it's just a way to help condense the career mode, easier to buy cars for a few hundred points than tens of thousands of dollars. Moving on with the story. We beat some events and are able to challenge our first underboss, Crunch, and for some reason we're able to bring our crewmate in with us. Unlike the main Carbon games, our crewmate is permitted to come into these duels with us and gives us a pretty big benefit, being able to have our crewmate slam him into the ether. Crunch is easily dispatched, being rammed into eternity, and we move on to his boss, Arjun. Look at this face. You can't not want to beat this dude. And once again, Arjun is dispatched with ease, using the same strategy as before, get our crewmate to slam into them, and then just drive past. With the Lucky Sevens defeated, we move on to the Eastsiders and Poor Boy. We are then met with a new flashback, a party going on, the night of our brother's demise, and Poor Boy was there. Maybe if we beat him, he'll give us some much needed information. And with the new region come new crewmates. Juice is a Mad Max fan, his bio calling him a true road warrior, and with my opinion, the best looking crew car in the game so far. And the other is Marcus, with also his quite clean RX-7. I'll be sticking with Juice for the most part, with Attacker being just so much more useful than Drafter. What's this? Seems Poor Boy used to be with our bro's crew, and he wanted to be number one? Our brother didn't like that. Another flashback ensues, remembering our brother being kind of a douche at us sucking at driving, but I'm sure that doesn't mean anything. Poor Boy doesn't want us sniffing around either, it seems. Could we be getting closer to the mystery? I don't know about you, but I'm suspicious. Next up is a sprint race, and damn, this game puts the sprint in sprint race. A whole race run and done in 25 seconds. But I suppose that's what you want with handheld games, quick fun races with a little time commitment. The extra plus side being, when you get ragdolled by random traffic cars, you don't lose much time. Of course, not all races abide by this, some circuit races taking far too much time, and the general lack of opposite rubber banding, if you will, allows the AI to storm ahead and leave you in the dust. But I'm not going to complain about it. And now it's time to visually upgrade our RX-8. We get some more vinyls given to us from before, and why don't we take a look at what we can get. We can get vinyls such as Odd Machine, America, Sonny's Golf from Most Wanted, Line Again, Robot. Wow, a lot to look forward to for sure. There is some benefit to upgrading your car visually, with getting more points for each race depending on the visual style of your car. We win enough races and we're able to challenge the Eastsiders leaders, starting with Sly. Potential crew member Turtle messages us, pledging his allegiance if we beat Poor Boy. I guess we'll answer the age-old question, are we turtly enough for Turtle? We pick the tried and true strat of ramming these bosses with our crewmate. Bring it on, Sly. Wait, what was that? Did you catch that? Go back. Sly, for some reason, has our Shrek vinyl that I made earlier on the hood of his Mustang. I don't know how or why, my assumption being the game only keeps 3 slots for not side vinyls, and all hood vinyls coming from the custom vinyl slots, which I guess causes this. Sly is easily dispatched, only needing to be rammed twice before we take the win, and Poor Boy gets in touch with us, promising to give us information on our brother's crash. If we can beat him. Of course, we easily beat Poor Boy back into his slum, his Audi TT really being the opposite of poor in my eyes, and we easily flog him due to him getting stuck with Juice against a wall for an entire lap. Poor Boy does give us some juicy info though, the identity of our brother's killer. Buddy. Never trust a buddy. Buddy!
My name is Incrediboy.
The race our brother was killed in was supposed to decide who controlled the entire city, and thanks to some mutual smashing, the city got split up. We go meet X, leader of Crimson, to get some details on Buddy. Sarah doesn't like this, and something happens. It's pretty unclear what happens, some sort of explosion or something. Either way, it's on to Leia and the Sirens, in the search for Buddy. New territory, new upgrade time. Neither of the new cars I unlocked really appeal to me, so I'll stick with the RX-8, which stat-wise is apparently better than a stock Aston Martin DB9. Just look at the charts, it's clear. It's also the point of the game where things start to feel a little grindy. Each section needs 7 race wins to face the boss, which isn't much, but when that includes potentially terrible hunter races, which I'll touch on later, or long rubber bandy circuits, it can start to feel like a slog. And since this video is already more than 10 minutes long, I'm going to gloss over most of the gameplay and just focus on the story for now. Gameplay wise, things don't really change. We unlock some faster cars, other mods, but no new race types or events, so I'm going to focus on the end of the story for now. We're able to track down Buddy after defeating Leia, and he reveals that he was hired by someone to hit our brother, and gives us his phone to help track down the person who placed the contract. With this information and the sirens defeated, it's on to Corpse and MK. MK goes down like the rest, being rammed into oblivion, and MK reveals himself to be an undercover cop. Who could have guessed? And using Buddy's phone, points us in the direction of the person who hired him. X. That's right, the guy that sent us to Buddy in the first place placed the hit. MK and the cops arrest X after we slam him into a wall a few times and win. And just like that, it's all resolved. Sarah returns from the dead, that explosion apparently killing her, or not, who knows, and we go for a drive while she reveals the real person behind all this. That's right, it's not Buddy, not X, it was you, the player. As it turns out, our brother was abusive to both us and Sarah, and we paid X to help get rid of him. X hired Buddy, who then finished the job, just as we saw at the start of the story. That's right, we've been tracking ourselves down this entire time, having our abusive brother get killed in a street race to escape his grasp. May I remind you that this is all the story for the DS version of a Need for Speed game. I played this when I was like 11 and I had no idea what was going on. This is the version of the game that you think would be for younger audiences, but the story is 10 times more complicated and darker. It reads like a script that should star Matt Damon. They managed to fit a really dark and serious story into a game that is rated G for general audiences here in Australia. If you've got a spare 10 minutes, that's right, 10 minutes, go and watch all of the cutscenes on YouTube just to get a glimpse into this odd deviation from the Need for Speed formula and to handheld gaming as a whole in terms of tone. Being on handheld consoles aimed mainly at younger gamers, this easily could have been baby's first Need for Speed. Like Matt Tomporski said, it could have been a by-the-numbers racer affair, but it was able to be so much more. Now that the story is over and done with, I thought I'd finish this video off with my general thoughts about the game as a whole. First things first, the most important part of all Need for Speed games, the car list. The car list for the DS is fine. Unfortunately for the DS, storage is not its strong suit, with only 15 cars being featured in the final game. From the Volkswagen Golf to the Aston Martin DB9, overall it's not too bad. The MR2 in particular being a surprising inclusion for me, surprised it wasn't cut for another vehicle. The PSP version of the game includes a much more robust car list, featuring over 24 cars, the Pontiac GTO, or Holden Monaro as some would say, the Pontiac Firebird Trans Am, and a bunch of other fan favourites, such as the Ford Mustang, Ford GT, Nissan Skyline GTR, and Porsche 911s. Carbon Own the City featured the pretty standard race types you'd expect: Sprint, Circuit, Knockout, and Hunter. Hunter. That's not one that you might be familiar with. Hunter is terrible. It's sort of posed as almost a Burnout Light game mode, but instead it's more like Dodgem cars bouncing around the screen for far too long. Points are awarded for hitting your opponents and are subtracted for getting hit. But it makes no sense. It is not consistent in how hitting an opponent gets points. Sometimes opponents hit you and you get points, sometimes you hit them and they take points away. The physics do not lend themselves well to the constant hitting and ramming, and it is just an overall terrible excuse for a race mode. And there's no reason that this was included over the likes of a drag race mode, a basic drift mode, or even literally nothing. In my opinion, Hunter is perhaps the worst race type in any Need for Speed game I have played. And I've played a lot of them. Handling wise though, it's not too bad for a DS game, but as you can see, it can take a little getting used to. However, the driving in turn is pretty forgiving. You bounce off walls fairly easily and keep your momentum pretty well. You can pretty recklessly slam around with little penalty. And wow, 3 different types of turning: hard, medium, and shallow, depending on your combination of left or right and up and down. It makes for a uniquely controllable experience, especially for a handheld game. You know, if you can control it at all. Hard and medium turns are a great option, hard turns allowing you to take sharper corners and make up for the lack of an analog stick. But with shallow turns, I found myself pretty much always slamming into walls, and it felt like more of a lane change than a turn. And look, whilst walls aren't that big of a deal, other cars are less easy to shrug off, like I mentioned talking about Hunter. The crash physics are kind of hilarious, with cars almost ragdolling down the street when hitting a traffic car. There's nothing funnier than chasing after an opponent and seeing them slam into a traffic car and just incorporeally float across the road. And it wouldn't be Need for Speed without a robust customization. Customization options are unlocked by completing individual races in the map. Body kit types, rims, spoilers, vinyls, all unlocked via completing specific events, much like Carbon on consoles. And also like Carbon, there is some limited crew customization. I chose the Mortal Kombat dragon, being the hardest of all dragons. Unfortunately, Logo is about all the customization you can do for your crew, with no option to customize your crew's vehicles. A notable feature of customization is the custom decal option. Thanks to the glorious power of the DS system, you can create any decal you want, like Number, British, Shrek, Arrow, Shrek again, and that would be how we saw Shrek on the cover of Sly's car earlier. And you can also customize the interior of your car. Dash styles, fuzzy dice, and custom gauges all make great use of the lower screen of the DS. And another fun feature is toys, which can replace your radio. I thought since I had to have the music muted due to recording, why not put a little thing in there instead of the radio? And I chose this little freak. I wasn't a fan of the dog, and he gave me massive bad vibes. And also, like I mentioned earlier, you get bonus points after each race depending on your car visual upgrade. So it definitely incentivizes you to customize your car as much as possible, from neon to body kits to ridiculous looking decals. And really, my favorite part of this game, the soundtrack. Thankfully, one thing this game takes from the main game is the banger soundtrack. Joker and the Thief and My Friend Dario being 2 bangers that I really got into thanks to this game. One thing that sticks into my brain from playing this game when I was younger was pausing the game whenever Joker and the Thief came on and just listening to the song, so it wouldn't stop when the race stopped. And in the game, they do a unique strategy to get around the limited space of the DS cartridge by cutting songs almost in half, allowing for a much larger track list, but with much shorter songs. Hi everyone, Editing Ryan here. As it turns out, after having a look at the soundtrack for the DS game properly, I was right about the shortened songs, but I was incorrect about the variety of songs. Unfortunately, the DS version only features 8 songs in the final game, something that I would have noticed if I had played this game with the sound on, instead of playing it on mute. The PSP version features an almost entirely full soundtrack from the console version of the game, so at least that's a plus. Unfortunately, due to not wanting to mess with the YouTube copyright, I had to play the game with the music set to 0. Which sucked, because the car sounds are terrible. Sure, I could have played the game on mute, and I didn't even end up using much of the sound for this video, but why don't we hear how the cars sounded anyway? Especially at low revs, they sound super compressed and whiny, with most cars sounding basically the same. Finally, what's missing from this game? Carbon Own the City does a very good job of adapting the game to handheld consoles. Unfortunately, due to the limitations of hardware, there are a few things that are unfortunately neglected. The car list on the DS being one major shortcoming for it, as well as the lack of canyon battles and also free roam on the DS version is very disappointing. But overall, they did a pretty good job at converting it over. The reception for Carbon Own the City was fairly solid. Our Lord and Saviours over at IGN gave Own the City a 7.5, and user scores online range from around 6.5 to 8, which I think is pretty fair. And IMDb actually has the rating at only 0.2 stars less than the main console version of the game. It seems like people generally like this game, and I've got to agree. It always makes for an interesting footnote when discussing the Need for Speed franchise, and for me, it's easily the best handheld Need for Speed, and for what it is, it's amazing. As much as I've sucked about some of this game's shortcomings, it really is one of the most fun races on the DS. I personally put it up there with the likes of Ridge Racer and Mario Kart. It's fun to play, the soundtrack is great, it looks pretty good for what it is, and overall, it's just a fun game. Team Fusion and Exient Entertainment could have just copied the ideas from the console release, pumped out a port built on the bones of the previous handheld games, and left it at that. But they didn't. They put a year of their lives, back when that was a decent amount of time to make a video game, into a handheld spin-off game. They didn't need to, but they did. They made one of the best handheld races I've ever had the pleasure of playing, and they made a game that the rest of the Need for Speed series should be honoured to stand aside. 40 men and women from Team Fusion worked for over a year on something that was different, and in Matt Tromporski's own words. So if that software represents 1 year out of the lives of 40 people that I respect and care about, don't those good people deserve our best effort to create something really unique? And they did it. They created one of the DS and PSP's most unique races, and one of my favourite games of all time. Hello everyone, thank you for watching our first video on the Nostalgia Bay YouTube channel. Please like and subscribe if you would like to see more videos like this, and if you want more stuff like this straight away, go listen to the Nostalgia Bait podcast, hosted by myself and my co-host Anastasia. We currently have a few episodes up on Spotify and whatever your podcasting platform of choice is, including an episode on the Need for Speed movie and Need for Speed Most Wanted. We have lots of other video ideas in the works, so be sure to ring the bell, subscribe, all that YouTube stuff, to be notified of when our next one comes out. Thank you.